Welcome to The Standard. From Vancouver, I'm Peter Klein. Coming up tonight, Nigeria is one of the world's top oil producers, but some think it's on the precipice of all-out civil war due to continued repression of those living in the oil-rich region of the Niger Delta. This important story is coming up later. But first, a man who's trying to end the slaughter of albinos in Africa. Albinism is a genetic condition, leaving those who suffer from it with little or no pigment in their eyes, skin, or hair. Often the subject of derision and taunting because of how they look, albinos face a difficult life, especially in Africa, where for some, being born with albinism is akin to a death sentence. Brutal murders have been taking place in Tanzania and other areas of East Africa, fueled apparently by the belief that using albino parts will impart magical powers. Businessman Peter Ash, an albino himself, heard about what's happening in Tanzania and decided to do something about it. Co-founding the charity Under the Same Sun, he's now working to end the persecution and slaughter of albinos in Africa. And he joins me now in studio. Welcome.
Thank you.
I think a lot of people have seen this recently in headlines. Just literally a couple weeks ago, there were a couple brutal cases. Can you tell me about what happened?
Actually, yeah. One of the cases occurred actually literally on the day that we departed from Tanzania. There was an attack of a 13-year-old girl. She survived.
Her arms
were removed. She's dismembered. In most of these ritual attacks, the vast majority of cases, the victims die because they bleed to death rapidly. Right. The 13-year-old girl survived. A week before we left, a 4-year-old little girl was chopped apart and died, all 4 limbs removed. And then actually a week after we got home, a mother and child, both with albinism, living in Burundi, right on the border of Tanzania, were both slaughtered and killed.
And so, I think the mother's eyes were gone?
Yeah, the mother's eyes and tongue were removed. Both arms and legs were removed. 9 men raided the compound where the mother and child were living, and both were dismembered, and the parts harvested for quick resale.
So let's back up for a moment. Explain what's going on here. This has been going on for a while.
Since 2007.
And why do people want these body parts?
Well, there is a foundation of discrimination and misunderstanding around albinism that exists in most non-Caucasian cultures, particularly in developing countries. In sub-Saharan Africa, it's believed in many cultures that persons with albinism are not human. They are inferior, they're curses, they're ghosts, Swahili term zeru zeru. Right. And so there's this sort of platform of discrimination and sort of devaluing of people with albinism.
I mean, most people are black, obviously, and then all of a sudden a white child is born.
You have to remember, imagine that mom and dad are both black, and all of a sudden this child is born as white as I am.
Right.
Their features are African. They're African in every way, except that their skin color is different.
Right.
And so they're a white black man, so to speak. And so the parents are, with a lack of medical information sometimes, are bewildered what's going on. And so they grasp for alternate explanations. And so what's happened is, the prevalence of witchcraft in these regions is so strong that on that foundation of discrimination, the witch doctors have laid upon this theory that if you get the albino body parts, the blood, skin, hair, bone of a person with albinism, and you use it in a combination with other ingredients, you can make a potion that has the power to make someone rich or powerful. And so this belief in witchcraft works together with this already established discrimination that people with albinism face.
But witchcraft has been around for hundreds, thousands of years. Why only in the last 4 years, is it 3-4 years has been this?
The answer is we don't know. We can conjecture. We do know that in East Africa, witchcraft seems to go in spates in terms of the focus. There was a period of time in Tanzania, for example, where people who had bald heads were being targeted. A period of time, people who had gaps in their teeth were targeted. And you have to understand sort of the philosophy or theology of witchcraft, if you will. And that is that the notion is that the victim has to be unique or special or powerful. Mm-hmm. And so therefore his or her parts have unique power.
But the idea is that if you're born looking like this in a country where everyone else is black, there must be something pretty special,
right, and
potentially magical about you, so I want to have a bit of that magic.
Right, and the idea is that if the albino is not a human being, if they are, as the Swahili term indicates, zeru zeru, a ghost or a ghost-like creature or a nobody or someone who's invisible, if they are in fact that, now when you have the body part of a person with albinism, you are not trafficking in human body parts, you're trafficking in ghosts, right? So now you can control this spiritual being at will. And so witchcraft is chiefly concerned with spiritual power, right?
So I've heard that when people with albinism walk down the street, some people even sort of shout something out, deal, deal, right?
Yeah, in some cases they do. In fact, that phrase, dealy, dealy, which is really an anglicized Swahili word for deal, deal. And it's happened in the last 2 or 3 years with all these killings because there's a lot of money involved here.
Yeah, this is not, we're not talking about like pennies, we're talking about thousands.
Exactly, and 2 of the trials that occurred in Tanzania, the evidence that in one of the cases was presented was that one of the killers was being cross-examined by the prosecution and basically said that a complete set, was the phrase he used, of albino body parts yielded a current market price of $75,000 US. That's 2 arms, 2 legs, and some remnant of the head.
That's a lot of money anywhere. But
that's a lot of money anywhere, and particularly in
Tanzania,
where the average median income is $800 a year, right? So when you have that kind of poverty juxtaposed to that kind of opportunity for wealth, a hand or an arm or a forearm is worth about $3,000. So you can see the motivation is pretty strong.
Right. So this may sound like a naive question, but with so much money involved, why? I mean, presumably nobody has any empirical evidence that consuming albino body parts really gives you magical powers. Correct. So why are people going through the effort, putting aside the ethics and human rights issues, why are people going through the massive effort and the cost to get these body parts? You
have to remember, the areas in which these killings are occurring are largely rural, isolated areas. And so, information doesn't travel quite the way it does here. Not everyone's watching 24-hour news and on the internet all the time. And so in your region, you might not know that it hasn't worked yet. Maybe another person has purchased albino body parts to use in his or her mining business or fishing business in a different region. And so the witch doctor, of course, is going to peddle the idea that it does work. Right. He has a self-interest in proclaiming that idea.
Do you think the witch doctors, some of them actually believe it?
I don't know. I would think every witch doctor we've interviewed, or the press has ever interviewed, of course, says they never do this, it's wrong, it shouldn't be happening. So do they believe it? Probably, because they believe in witchcraft. Some of them probably not. They're just con men looking for a way to make a buck. And we'll really never know who believes it and who doesn't. But what's more important, whether they believe it or not, is they're very convincing to their clients.
And there was a Pew study recently that showed in Tanzania, witchcraft, I think it's more prevalent in Tanzania than anywhere else in Africa.
Yeah, right? I've heard of that study. I haven't had an opportunity to read the study myself. But yes, I can tell you that from my 5 trips there now in the last 2 years, that witchcraft is hugely prevalent. And there's a whole range of people who believe in witchcraft, everywhere from casual beliefs in minor superstitions, all the way to people who are actively, kind of practicing witchcraft in a very, very scary way. You look at it in North America. How many elevators have you ever gone onto where there's a 13th floor?
Right.
Well, that's a form of witchcraft.
Right.
It's a form of superstition. Are we silly? Do we actually believe there's not 13 floors in that buildings? Of course there is. It's just called 14, right? And so, that's a light form of witchcraft that we've kind of accepted in North America, superstition. And so I would say everyone in Tanzanian society, like in most societies, or the vast majority, maybe not everyone, has some belief in that. But there is a segment of society that really strongly believe in witchcraft. And in particular regions of the country where witchcraft is practiced more widely, like in northwest Tanzania, where many of these killings are occurring. The witch doctor, really, in many of those villages, he is God. He is the reference point. And everyone, he's unquestioned.
Well, we have to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to talk to you about how you got into doing this. More with Peter Ash after this short break.